Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 247 of Retropower and Cut, and I'm back from my holes. I had a very nice time. It was very warm, very sunny, a beautiful North Norfolk coast, and we made lots of sand castles and dams on the beach with the kids, and yeah, it was generally a good little break, which was well needed because I've also been in the process of moving house, and obviously we're pretty busy here, and I'm trying to build an autogas car, and far too many things to do. So, on the more pertinent note of Retropower, we're going to start talking about Project Bassie, as it is known, the carbon fibre reliant scimitar project and its chassis, which I have just yesterday finished the structural modifications on. The chassis isn't completely finished. There are various other things to add, hence the outriggers looking very unsupported and things like that at the moment. There's a reason why that hasn't been done, because that's going to be done with a body in place. Not permanently in place, but the mock-up body in place. However, the plan was to get the centre tunnel modifications done, the narrowing, which you can see back here, done. This section has been narrowed, get all the bracing put back in, which is all now back in, and get all that done, which is done, and the narrowing that was done at the front, the change of angle on the front tubes, that's also done. So that's all now as we want it to be. So now I can build all this back up, get it all rolling again, and once it's all rolling again, we're going to put the body back on. Once the body's back on, we're going to do some scanning. And to that end, earlier today I actually spoke to Solid Print, and we will be renting the Libra scanner from them in order to do some scanning work on this and on the Saab, but I'll let Bobby explain about the Saab when he gets onto that. But on this we're doing a scan of the body and chassis complete, using a slightly higher definition, well, a chunk higher definition scanner than ours, which we are trialling with a view to buying to see if we can get a higher accuracy level than our current scanner, which I think we can. So that's, yeah, pretty much what's happened with that. I think I saw something in the comments ages ago about this being MIG welded, not TIG welded. It's an interesting point. It's all started because Sport Motive do MIG weld these chassis as per TVR's original, and there are pros and cons to that. I mean, a little aside right at the beginning of the video, there are pros and cons to MIG welding versus TIG welding on something like this. I do actually like TIG welding tube to tube, just because there are benefits to that, in that the starts and stops of the welds are much better to control, and you know there are no cold laps at the start and stops of TIG welds. You can be much more certain about the final weld quality with a TIG weld. But the downside to those is that it's much harder and much more time consuming, and probably require a multi-pass weld to get a very substantial fillet with a TIG weld, whereas with a MIG weld it's much easier to get a substantial fillet laid down in a single pass. And there's a large benefit to that, in that you gain a lot of weld strength from that big foot on a MIG weld, where your fillet is a substantial corner fillet done in one pass. That gains actually quite a lot of strength to the weld, simply from the sheer bulk of material and the landing area, if you like, of the weld. So there are pros and cons. It's not as cut and dried as TIG is better. There are pros and cons to the processes, so don't criticise the MIG work. There are reasons why MIG can actually be beneficial over TIG. Yes, some of the welds would be easier on this done with TIG, but they wouldn't necessarily automatically be better. So it's not as simple as better or worse. I just thought I'd point that one out. Moving on from that, we come on to E-Type. Scott's been working on this. Scott was working on this last week in my absence, continuing on the exhaust. He's carried on again for the early part of this week. Again, this is Thursday, just for those not familiar with our filming sequence. But Scott's been continuing with the exhaust. However, he's hit a point where we needed some more materials. There's been quite a lot of design back and forth around the rear silencers. I think I've seen some comments around those as well. There's been quite a lot of back and forth between the customer and us, and rightly so, because it's quite awkward to envision how best to do those rear silencers. So there's been a few decisions taken and retaken on that. And to that end, Scott's hit a point where he can't really progress, partly because he'd run out of a couple of pieces of material that he needed, and partly because there were some design decisions holding things up there. So he's moved on to another task that needed carrying on with, which is the dashboard area. And as you can see, the carbon fibre dash is loosely inserted inside the car. It's not fully fitted. Because it needs trimming in. It was all made over length on the open sections, and they've got to be trimmed in to fit in the car. In order to do that, Luke had drawn up some 3D printable trimming guides, which I believe have now been 3D printed. I've not actually looked, but I believe those have now been 3D printed, to use those for guidance on the final trim lines. So Scott has been in the extracted room, in the blast room where we've got the extraction, doing some trimming of the carbon fibre earlier on today, to enable him to get the dashboard more accurately fitted into the car. So that's the situation going on with this at the moment. That's being trimmed in to get that fitted into the car. So yeah, in terms of that, the dash will be progressing further. I think Scott's part way through trimming that, but there's more to go on that. The other areas of progress on this car, I will hand over to George. Well, I won't, but Cal will probably hand over to George in a bit to talk about those, because the other areas of progress are all CAD related. They will then fall into Scott's domain in a bit, when there's some actual parts, some prototype parts made. But most of that is revolving around the air intake system, and we'll all rely on rapid prototype parts to then do the metalwork around. So that's where we'll leave the E-Type for the moment. Moving on to the Saab, I am once again going to hand over to Bobby to do a rundown. He's just walking past, and I hadn't warned him about that actually, but I'm going to hand over to Bobby again to describe what's been going on the Saab and the work he's been doing on both ends of the Saab, actually on various parts on that. But over to Bobby.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Heavy Metal Shop. So we've been busy with fabricating all the mounting points and the pivot points for the Audi Avant rear seats, the folding rear seats. I've been focusing on fabricating the side boxes which serves as a mounting point for the lower pivot points, the outer pivot points for the backrests. And we try to source them out from a breaker somewhere. So because they're kind of pressings which are spot welded, depends on models, we couldn't find any source, so we end up fabricating them ourselves. And so that's been that. Also, I had to fabricate the reinforcement plates for the anchor points for the buckles on the floor. Because this was a two-door convertible, obviously there was a completely different setup, but then the actual chassis is the same across the whole Audi A4 B7s. Just add-on panels here and there and extra holes and things. Yeah, so it was a bit of a challenge to find the exact location of the middle bracket, which was it's just bought on Audi bracket, but then we had to find the exact location of that bracket to keep everything square in the same plane, so the seats can fold nicely. And so that bracket is bolted with 4 bolts. For these 4 bolts, I couldn't find any witness marks on the pressings or on the bulkhead to drill the hole, so I had to find this myself, drill that. But then because the bulkhead is thin metal, it's about 0.91 mil, and it's flexing a lot, so I had to fabricate a reinforcer. That's for the bracket. Same story was for the bolts where the buckles are bolted through the floor. Only on the near side, these two they share the two buckles for the near side passenger and the middle passenger. They share the same bolt, and there's a pressing underneath, kind of double skin. So on that double skin there was a pre-drilled hole but the hole was not drilled on the bulkhead, so for me it was easy just find the center, drill it, and weld it in the back. I weld extra reinforcement as well with a captive nut, so that was that. Then I had to find a location on the offside passenger buckle, which again I had to figure out the height and all that, so both of them are setting in the same height and they're not sticking up and all that. So that's been primarily my focus to get them done, so it's so working as it should. And then I moved on to design and fabricate the rear sort of parcel shelf tops, I would guess. So they're kind of boxing the space from the window down between that and the top of the inner wheel tops. So these boxes, I would guess, will serve will contain the rear speakers, and also underneath them we'll have the seat belt rails for both offside and nearside passengers, and they will also serve as a place where the parcel shelf will rest eventually once that's designed. And and to do them I had to do the pipe which is going across the back seats, and this pipe is pretty much the same where this is, but it's a bit here lower. The pipe which is going across is also as a strut brace, so it ties in both suspension turrets, and that will stop them from trying to twist. And so that will be also tying into the sides, to the inner quarters as well. On this tube as well, we're gonna have the striker, so the latch, which is here, will latch to them. So that's the rear strut brace that I'm working on now, and everything is just revolving around the strut brace, little bulkhead pieces, infill pieces underneath it there, which will kind of separate the boot from the passengers, and there will be again a fabricated kind of interior piece here as well, which will kind of close the gap between the side of the seats and the inner quarters. So that's the agenda now, and I think we'll leave the rest for next week. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for that, Bobby. And moving on from that, we'll come on to the BMW. And this slightly daunting looking piece that Stu is working on, as you can see, or probably can see depending on where Jamie's got the camera pointing, the car has its offside rear quarter panel loosely fitted, loosely clamped in place. Stu has brought that down and put it safely on the car, so he's got a reference from an original BMW quarter panel in terms of dimensions and shape, so he can use that for the work he's doing on this one. Pardon me. You may remember from previous episodes, again for those viewers that we've picked up since the last episode, we couldn't get a new or new old stock panel for the near side rear quarter panel, so we are repairing, or more correctly Stu is repairing, the existing one, which was basically rotten where it met the sill, completely ruined in terms of rust and crash damage on the rear wheel arch, bent along the swage line, and rusty and missing the large part of the rear lower corner, and considerably rusty and damaged with accident damage on the rear boot shut corner and around the rear light, and a bit rusty up here and a bit rusty around the trim holes. All in all, verging on scrap, but importantly not quite scrap. So we have the repair panels again from Woloth and Nesh, for the sill joint for the lower forward part, for the wheel arch part, and for the rear corner. It's unfortunate that's not one panel, but it's not the end of the world that it's not one panel. So Stu has done a lot of measuring, and a chunk, basically the first part of this week, has been trying to get the bit of quarter panel that we are using up here to the correct shape, because crash damage had basically bent it and folded it in on the wheel arch. It had shortened the wheel arch and curved this panel in 2 directions, all of which had meant that it was actually about 7 millimeters shorter along sort of this length here than it should have been. So Stu has been rigging up various means of stretching that panel back to shape. So he's used a mechanical pusher that we've got. It's like a hydraulic porter power, but a ratchet type one that we use for quick pushes on when we're straightening bits of car. He's arranged that, had that welded into plate, had a bearing plate welded in on the front here, and then on the damaged section at the back here, he bolted on a bracket that he made so he could put that ratchet section in there and push the quarter back and preload it, and then do some stretching work and some realignment work on this swage line to be able to push that quarter and stretch that back to the shape it should have been, so that it matches loosely the quarter that's on the other side, more correctly matches the correct length. Once he'd done that, he's welded this in place, got this lower section made, tacked up, TIG welded in, and largely metal finished, not completely. The care here is that just below that black line, this won't be very evident on camera, but just below that black pen line, there's a swage line there. It's very indistinct, but there's a swage line running, a style line running down the car there, and it's very important not to lose that, because if you lose that, you won't find it again. It's so slight that it'll just disappear into the panel and be very hard to find, but there is a swage line running along there. So keys, a few sort of key bits of information on doing this sort of repair. One is, if you look back through our videos and find the autofocus videos, I did a video on butt welding in repair panels, which covers the basic method of how these panels will be welded in. So if you're not sure, because I'm going to skip over that now, but if you're not sure, go back to the autofocus video and look at butt welding repair panel sections, and I did a section on how we TIG weld sections in. But basically, Stu's cut the panels, trimmed them to lengths, snipped them with snips so that they're a nice, clean, sharp, straight edge on both panels, got them set together, then he'll have put tacks on, tack on, let it cool, tap it up until we get the gap back, do the next tack, tack it, inch forward, tack, wait for it to cool, tap it up, inch forward, tack, wait for it to cool, tap it up, inch forward, all the way along, tacked, wait for it to cool, tap it back up to get the gap back, till all of that is tacked. And all the way along, you've got a gap of somewhere between 0.1 and 0.5 of a millimetre, something like that, all the way along. And then he's TIG welded it complete, end to end, and then planished that up, and that's gone pretty well. He had to do a stop to get a new rod there, and you can see what happens when you do that. It's put a low in there and a low in there, which is where he had a little stop. When he's done the stop, it's done a radial shrink on the end of that panel. That one it's pulled a bit funny because this panel had a load of residual stresses in it. That one it's pulled exactly where you'd expect it to pull, a radial shrink around the end of the weld which stopped there. So it's very easy, when you know where the problem is, it's very easy to correct it. You just do some additional panel beating on that, it'll stretch that, and that'll bring that back. Hasn't quite there because, as I say, there's residual stresses in this panel because it was accident damaged. When that happens, it does funny things. You have more of a problem panel beating it, but he'll get that sorted. So he's done that. Then he's got the quarter repair section. Repeatedly tried that through all of the stretching and reshaping operations. When he was certain on that, he's marked that on, scribed round it, then he's cut the quarter with snips, he's cut the repair section with snips, he's left tabs on. There's little tabs of quarter panel underneath these clecos. There's small tabs under there that can be cut off afterwards, and he's left those in so the cleco, these spring-loaded cleco clamps have got something to clamp into. He'll then, once he's finalised that fit and got all that perfect and sanded it in if it needs any sanding in and basically made sure it's perfect, then he'll start tacking this. And again, tack, inch, tacked at 1 inch intervals, but don't do more than one tack without tapping it up. Never progress and go, oh, I can get away with a second tack or a third tack. Never do that. You do one tack, wait for it to cool, tap the tack up, get your gap back, then do the next one, and so on. It's very slow, very painstaking process. But tack, wait for it to cool, tap it up on a hammer and dolly until you get the gap exactly back to where you started, all the way along. Very, very fine process that, but very important. You don't tap up each tack, it'll all pull out of shape. So do that, get it all tacked up, then fully weld that out, then panel beat that up. And he's already pre-welded this corner section. That was a joint there as well, just like that joint there that's not welded. That was a joint there that he's pre-welded, and again, tacked up, welded, panel beat to get all completely smooth, no stretch, no shrink, no nothing, all the right shape. And that's all going to be welded in, and all of that panel beat, and all of that metal finished. Then we should have a quarter that's the right shape, apart from the bit you can't currently see on camera, which is this rear corner. So there'll be quite an exciting episode on that. Stu and I have had a bit of a to and fro about how we're going to go about making that bit. However he goes about making that bit, it's going to be challenging. It's a really tricky bit to do. So there'll be some fun to watch on camera on that, because it's quite awkward, and it's probably the most awkward part of the panel, and it's basically scrap. So it's going to be quite interesting to see that one develop. So that's where we're at on BMW E9. Actually, we also need early next week to blast the door inners so that Stu can get the door skins on. We need to blast them. So hopefully early part next week I'll fire the big blast room up and we'll blast those door inners. I'll possibly try and blast the door inners for the Aston, which is a neat segue onto Aston Martin. On the Aston, Matt has been busily working on the rear floor section. Shall we go round there? Let's walk round, go through a forest of welders, and we'll come round to the, I can talk through the car, that's a good idea. So Matt's been working on getting the seats in, basically, or getting the seats into the position they will be in. So we did a lot of toing and froing last week and a bit the tail end of the week before when I was here, working out a suitable seating position. It's actually quite tight, this car. It's strange. It's incredibly wide, but it's very, very low. So getting a seating position whilst maintaining decent ground clearance and getting decent head clearance is actually surprisingly tricky. But I think we're about there. I think we've got that about right, although it is a bit awkward. So Matt and Cal kind of worked out the positioning that the seats needed to be in, and then I came up with a bit of a plan of how to support the front of the seats and also add in the transverse strength that we need, A, to make the car a bit safer, a bit stronger, but also to hang the gearbox off, because we need some transverse strength in the centre of the car to be able to support the gearbox. So we've come up with a folded structure, folded in 2mm thick steel, with an upper section and a lower section that will weld together and also provide a flange for the floors to attach to and give us floor overlaps that are basically trailing floor overlaps, so that if you hit something in the road it can't peel your floor downwards. We basically try and have the overlaps as a trailing overlap in the floor. There'll be an overlap at the front and an overlap at the centre and an overlap at the rear, and they're all trailing overlaps, so travelling in a forward direction nothing can peel any of those joints if you hit something from underneath the car. That hollow section, as I say, Matt's made those up, done a really nice job, folded those sections up. He's cut them in and neatened them in to the centre tunnel boxes, if you like, that he's made. He's got those welded in place, done the chamfers on the inside, which I think would have been covered last week. Got those two boxes prepared and made to fit and cut in, and got those all temporarily screwed together. And then he's made the rear floor pans, which are in 18 gauge steel, with the sides folded to roughly, they're approximately 45 degrees. Matt's patterned them. He's made a bending pattern in both directions from steel strip of the same thickness to work out where his bend centres are. He's folded them up, got them to the right shape, and then flattened them out to get his bend centres, and then he's made them, again, talking about previously doing some work in CAD and some work in cardboard, some in CAD, some in cardboard. Matt's done those the manual way, and rightly so. There's no point in trying to do them in CAD, because you would undoubtedly need to fettle them to exact fit anyway. So do them the manual way. It's quicker and easier than trying to draw them to start with. So he's done that, made a bending template in both directions, folded those up, welded up mitered and welded the corners, mitered and welded the front corners, flanged them and got them all screwed in into their final positions. Not fully welded yet. We're going to fully weld everything when everything's finalised and there's nothing that we might have to go back on. So at the moment it's just all screwed into place. So he's got those all done, and then he's got some bits of timber and signboard just thrown in the footwells to simulate floors. And next step really on this is going to be a customer visit to come and just verify seating position and work out steering wheel position and pedal positions and just finalise all of that, make sure everything's okay before we start putting captive nuts in and welding things finally in place. I should add there's some further bits to go inside those hollow sections in the underside of those hollow sections that form the seat supports, which will also form the threaded inserts that carry the transmission cross member that will also bolt into those sections. So there's more work to do there. Matt has now moved on to the rear end because we've received the rear panel very nicely from, and I've had a mental lapse again, there are too many things to remember, but our friends down in Irchester, Jamie's going to have to put it up on the screen because I've totally had a mental lapse on the name, but Claire and Sean have very kindly sent us the replacement rear panel, which has arrived, and Matt's got that in place. And pleasingly, none of the back of the car was out of shape. That fitted exactly on. So, but it was best to check, A, because the rear panel was damaged, and B, because it had been cut at both ends. I was concerned that the width of the car across the chair legs, as we call them at the back, because they look like they've been just cut off an office chair, were welded on. I was a bit concerned that the width across those might have been wrong. However, a nice confirmation on having that panel is that that all fits perfectly. So that's great. Matt is now working on the rear transverse member that will carry the boot floor, tie the rear chassis legs together and mount the lower edge of that panel, which is basically a flat strip with a joggle on top in 2mm thick steel, and then a top hat section folded in 16 gauge, all blended into the rear of the car. That's how all that goes. So that'll be coming together. It's coming together very nicely. It's obviously a long way to go and a lot of fabrication to do, and we were discussing earlier the roll cage tubing that we are going to be adding into the upper structure of this car just to make it a little bit stronger. But yeah, that's all coming together very nicely. On that note, finally, the last part to cover this week, and you can probably hear the incredibly loud sanding operation going on in the background. Gaz has managed to find a bit of the car that's really resonating well, is we've actually got a little bit of rework in, which we're going to put our hands up to. There is a Mark II Golf, which we painted around 9 years ago, I believe, for a local customer. We actually did a body shell restoration on that car. It was a very good body shell to start with, but we did a body shell restoration, a blast zinc metal spray and paint. And it's had some ongoing minor paint defects, some slight blistering under the paint, which we had looked at previously. We weren't really sure what had caused it. We actually managed to flat a lot of it out in the clear coat. So we'd sort of swept the issue under the carpet and hoped for the best. Now, the customer contacted us again, it would have been a couple of months ago, contacted us again saying these defects are back, can you have another look at them? Now, obviously, the elapsing of time would normally mean we would be a bit, it's kind of probably beyond warranty really, but the issue was first raised a while ago. So we said, yes, we'll have a look at that. We have done, and interestingly, we found the source of the mystery defect, or the main mystery defect. There was a second one which we think we may have, we might be a small error of ours, but the major mystery defect turns out to be factory e-coat. We had one genuine panel that was used on the car which had a factory e-coat on it. Well, we had two actually. One was new old stock, one was new. The one which was new old stock, there seemed to be some bits of damage in the factory coating, so we stripped it all off. The other panel was labelled as e-coat, and we could find no damage on that e-coat whatsoever. We keyed it all up, sanded back to bare metal any areas that we suspected there was anything wrong with, which there wasn't. And then we prepped and painted that panel from there. It was a new wing. And we've discovered that the defects are coming from corrosion under the original factory e-coat, which we should have stripped it all off to start with. Obviously, normally we strip a complete car to bare metal. However, because it was a new genuine panel, we made the fatal flawed assumption that what appeared okay would be okay, and that there wouldn't be corrosion under the e-coat. However, there is corrosion under the e-coat, so we're now stripping it back to bare metal and dealing with it. It's one of those things. Poo happens, using a polite term. We take it on the chin, we carry on, and we're going to get it all sorted out. But it is just one of those things that you can get tripped up a number of years down the line by something that should have been right originally, that you made the assumption would be right originally, and it's just one of those things where it's a bit of a kick in the teeth, but worse things happen and we'll get it sorted out. So yes, we do stand by our paintwork for quite some time, regrettably from our point of view, but good from the customer's point of view. And he's a good guy, he's a nice guy that owns the car, he's a local guy, we want to see him happy, so it's getting dealt with. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Cal and let him take you through the assembly shop.
Thank you very much, Nat. And we're starting with a slightly unusual top-down view of this stunning car, Project Stravaig, which George is working on at the minute. So we're just tackling a problem which we'd kind of had at the back of our minds, but weren't sure it was going to be a major issue. But it was very difficult to open the bonnet, because when you pull the pins out, it didn't pop up at all. It was very difficult to get your fingers around the edge of the bonnet and pull it up, and it's an incredibly heavy bonnet. So we've come up with some little sprung plungers to do a nice job of it, which are going to look absolutely spot on under there. You can actually buy these things. They're like a little cylinder with a spring and a plunger in with a rubber end on it, which are called kind of door poppers usually. Typically used in slightly naff hot rods where you press a remote and it undoes the door latch and pops the door, so you can shave the door handles. But this is hot rodding terminology that I very much don't like the sound of. Anyway, it was a good starting point to look at how those are made. As it was, we've kind of used the spring and the rubber end, but made the rest of it ourselves because there was so much playing and they weren't very acceptable. So what we've done is made a machined housing, a machine plunger that the rubber top goes on, used the spring that came with the poppers we bought, little grub screw goes in the side to retain it all together, and then George has made some sort of integrated into those some mounting plates which bolt up to the bonnet, let's say surround metalwork, and then we are going to finish them with some really nice bezels. So we've basically taken the CAD for these bonnet pin bezels here, deleted the pin detail in it, and then done a larger counterbore in the middle such that the plunger can actually go down almost flush into that counterbore, and then we'll have a bezel that just mimics all of the other design details, because these bonnet pin bezels have been mimicked with the bezel around the pin here and these reservoir caps. So all we're going to end up with is another little bezel in here, symmetrical, one each side, with a little sprung plunger in there with a rubber top. So now when you put the pins in, you just push the bonnet down, put the pins in. As soon as you pull the pins out, the bonnet pops up enough for you to get your fingers underneath. So nice elegant solution to that problem. Gibbo, in the meantime, has been on with interior fitment, so he's just getting ready to fit the back seat in for the final time. He's just doing a few little fettles on that to clear some of the wiring that's running under there. He's also finished off the centre console, so he got the cordless charger wired up in that. We've got a little 12 to 5 volt converter under there, secured all the wiring to that, secured in the volume control for the Audison amplifier, and that, if it's not bolted in for the final time, it's ready to be. In fact, I can see the bolts, so yes, that is in for the final time. And then Steve has prepped and painted the instrument panel, so the instruments are now, I think, in that for the final time over there with its 3D printed retaining bracket. He's also fitted all the warning light modules and wired up those warning lights to their little multi-plug connector. So we're basically ready to just fit that now and make all the connections. And then as soon as Gibbo's finished in the back seat area, he can get the rear quarter cards in. As soon as he's got those in, we can get the front seat in and actually button up the interior in pretty short order. So various prongs of attack, but all coming together very nicely. That's that. Interceptor, and I say that whilst looking seemingly vaguely into the distance because the Interceptor's engine is down here. So a couple of things on this. We were just trial fitting the gearbox last week. We wanted to do an actual fit up of the starter motor and check the engagement with the ring gear. So we've had the flex plate on there, had the starter on there, actually trialled it to make sure it all engages perfectly, and that's all looking good. So as soon as we get the actual transmission, this is not the final transmission, the actual one's away being rebuilt at the minute. As soon as we get that back, we're basically in a position to get this lot in the car. And then not long after that, get it rolling, which is what Toby even has been on with. So this is the rear cross member main piece that's just come back from powder coat, so we're going to have to unmask all of that now. When everything goes for powder coat, we kind of bung up all of the faces that might have bushes inside them or threads that need masking or have bolts put into them. So all of that masking needs removing from that cross member now. That's already been done on the wishbones. There's various parts that are basically need unmasking from powder coat, and then everything will come together to build up the rear cross member. At the minute he's just reassembling the rear coilovers because we've pulled them apart just to paint certain areas of them, not the threaded parts but the other bits, because they're a bare aluminium finish. We didn't want to completely rebuild those dampers because even we have a point where we're like, do we go this far? No. But basically the dampers are supplied with a bare aluminium finish, which will definitely definitely get surface corrosion on it. Now, while we'll grease the threaded part with the spring seat on it, the other part, we've drawn the line at basically prepping it and masking it and painting it with a polyurethane paint. And then there's two already built up here, the other two are following close behind. All the hub flanges have been painted on the back face, not on the mating face, so the wheel will leave bare, but they're basically ready to fit now as well. So everything's got its surface finishing done, and we're just in the process of building everything up. So once we get the gearbox back, engine gearbox in, subframes in, be rolling, which is quite an exciting prospect. I'm going to meander my way over here. Actually, just seeing the Interceptor reminded me of something else Toby's been on with, which was the horn fitment. So basically just making the bracket. Where the original horn fitment location is, we'd put the expansion tank and we put some threaded bosses elsewhere to mount the horns in a new location. So it's just been making up the horn bracket to mount those horns and getting that installed. XJC, Mark's fitted it's fresh in my mind because I saw the bits of footage of his hands coming through what is actually the brake pad replacement hatch. Now it won't be on this car because we've got outboard rear discs, but for the inboard disc setup, for those that don't know, on an E-Type, for instance, it's in the cockpit behind the seats. There's two little hatches you take out to be able to change the brake pads. And on these, in the front face of the boot, same deal. There's two hatches you take out to be able to change the brake pads. But they're now redundant from that purpose. The one on this side actually has the bulkhead fittings for the fuel system going through it. But we've got some amusing footage of Mark's hand going through that as the easiest way to do up some of the bolts that hold in what is the spare wheel support plinth at the front here. So where we've reshaped the boot floor at the back here for our revised valance design and for the link pipes for the fuel system that link the two fuel tanks in our installation, not originally. There's a step up, and we've kind of matched that at the front with a shape that allows us to put a space saver spare in there, and that still fits under the original boot floor panel. So that's that. And what are the other things on this? I know there is something. Window mechanisms. Mark has been stripping down. In fact, to be fair, Mark's been going through a lot of parts for this car, just generally prepping things ready to go. So he's stripped and repainted the rear window slide assemblies. There's this kind of metal pressing that the window guides go down into through a kind of interesting pattern of tracks, which is what give it the really cool window lowering. So on these, the window kind of goes down and then falls forward and down the rest of the way, which is the best way to get it down as far as it can be into the quarter panel, given the shape of it. And those pressed pieces are notorious for getting very rotten because the water gets down into them. Now on the car, the grey XJC we built years ago, 7 years ago maybe, 8 years ago, they were rotten. I actually had to source a replacement set, and I ended up having to source them from another country because I couldn't find anyone in the UK that had a decent set. And this donor car was actually pretty good, so those were not completely rotten. They had surface rust. Mark's just manually cleaned that off and repainted them. And then on the front ones, there's like a square frame with a cable arrangement in it. It's all quite, I wouldn't say a complete bodge by Jaguar, but you can certainly tell that they kind of hustled together the two-door version a bit hurriedly in some places. So there's this big metal frame with a cable arrangement that raises and lowers the windows. And they obviously realised after testing that the motors weren't really powerful enough to acceptably bring the windows up. So they did an arrangement that looks like a tape measure. It's basically a kind of extending maybe linear spring, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but if you imagine how a tape measure is, it's basically a wrapped up bit of metal that comes out and then springs vigorously back when you let go of it. And that's hooked around the window clamp arrangement and basically assists the motor in the upwards direction. But yeah, Mark's been stripping and refurbishing all of that frame and regulator arrangement, including there's some nylon rollers that the cable runs around, and I think one of them, maybe two, was completely ruined. I don't know if it had a previous door repair and maybe the welding heat had affected it, but something had half melted it. So George Sinclair made up a nice little tool to be able to machine a replacement one of those on the lathe. So we've machined up a replacement wheel for that, fitted that in, stripped them, painted them. They're ready to go in now. So we're just getting all the parts ready to bolt in, and so then the actual assembly process goes a little bit more smoothly. And all the while we've got running gear stuff coming through for this as well, so we'll be able to get all the subframes built up for this fairly soon too. And then Morris in the background over there. One of the things the customer wanted us to look at on that was the door cards. When we made the door panels, we were experimenting in ways to try and avoid the witness you sometimes get on the door panels from the clips. So the head, the back of the clip that clips the door card on, sometimes leaves a little trace that you can see through the leather, and you kind of just see the heads of the clips slightly, which I find really annoying. And we're experimenting with a different method on this because the door handle and the various door furniture bits actually clamp most of the door card on. It's only really the top edge that needs retaining, and we, in quite a lot of trim applications, we use a 3M tape called Dual Lock, which is kind of like Velcro but way stronger, and it's like little tiny top hat shapes, almost like drawing pin shapes but in miniature, in plastic, and then when you push them together the heads kind of grip together, almost slightly reminiscent of stickle bricks, and that's a very generational thing. I don't know if they still make stickle bricks, but it certainly takes me back to being at primary school. But basically it's a very strong way of attaching, and it's incredibly strong in the vertical sort of shearing fashion. Pulling directly apart, slightly less strong. Now I did quite a lot of tests when we first put it together to make sure that slamming the door didn't mean the door card came off. But with time, lots of door slamming, bit of heat and cooling, it's just slightly pulling away at the top, and actually it's not even the grip of the plastic sort of engagement, it's the adhesive on the tape that's failing. So I've come up with this idea to do basically an aluminium J-channel section at the top, bit like you'd find on a lot of old cars. I think Mark 1 Escorts are like this, but quite a lot of old cars, the door card top actually pushes up into a channel, and then you push the rest of it on with clips. So we've just made up those J channels for the top, which will bolt to the frame of the door. They'll be painted the same graphite colour that the rest of the inside of the door is painted, and so basically the top edge of the door card will just be retained in a channel, which would have been a great idea originally had I thought about that originally, but I didn't. So we're doing a nice little retrofit on that to just perfectly finish off the top of the door cards. And that is that. I think on that note, I'm going to hand over to George to talk about what he's been up to in the CAD den this week.
Hello and welcome back to Not the CAD Cave. So I thought today, since I've been working mainly on this car, we would do it here. It's been a lot of bitsy stuff this week. As someone might have already mentioned, Luke's been off for this week, last week and next week. So I've been inundated with lots of bitsy jobs and the kind of little things that he normally gets on with. So I've been running around like a headless chicken. But what I've been trying to get on with is the engine bay of this. So we've got all of this tested, and well, that's what I've been doing this week, is testing all of this, making any little provisions and changes. There's a couple bits and bobs we've had to change and wanting to change. So aesthetically, we wanted to make this not as bulgy, so it was more symmetrical to that side. And just generally just tweaking some little bits and bobs which we're not 100% with. Other things which I've been involved with but not specifically doing is the skin of the bonnets on, which is very exciting because obviously it was designed by me and Cal, 2 years ago or something like that, quite a long time ago, so it's pretty exciting seeing that on the car. And also the dash, which I'm sure Nat's already talked about, but Scott's been getting fitted today, which I've been helping with a little bit, and that's looking mega. Also, I have a prop. We've been doing some playing with exhaust designs. So Scott's been doing the system, so we've been trying to figure out what we're doing rear end wise. And we've kind of had a couple of ideas. Originally we thought we was going to go the standard system, but now after some conflabs with the customer, we are going with 2 of these, putting it out the back, so it's going to go from 4 to 2, and then the exact tips we're still not sure on because there's a bit of kind of back and forth of what we want to go. But effectively Scott's going to make the system with these and terminate it with this, and then we can kind of do the last little bit at a later date. What else have I been on with? Yeah, lots of bitsy jobs which I'm not going to go into because I can't remember them, and I'm not Luke and can't autistically remember everything. But yeah, it's been a productive but bitsy week with E-type things, and I'm going to stop rambling and leave it there. So thank you. Handing back to Cal.
Thank you very much, George. And actually, we're now going to head down to the den and see what's going on down there, and I will see you next week.
Thank you very much, Cal, and welcome back to the den. Quick one outside. So we've got the trusty camper van back. That's popped back basically just to manage a bit of bodywork and paint on this. So that's all pretty much done. Just a quick turnaround really, so that'll be going back. The Porsche, we're doing loads on the Porsche this week, having done the inspection. So like I said last week, it's mostly kind of snagging small odd jobs. the passenger window didn't work, which I think was basically a partially seized motor and regulator, which we sorted out. The windscreen washer pump, realigned the front headlights. They got some really nice little adjusters that you can lift up the mounting tray up and down, which is quite cool. They're all a bit manky, so just had all that apart, gone through the ultrasonic cleaner, greased them up, put them back in just to realign that. We've got the alternator off at the moment being tested. It's the original alternator. There's some weird kind of charging things going on and weird things with warning lights on the dash, which I'm fairly sure is alternator related, but just to be certain, I've sent the alternator away to a specialist and they are just testing the output and seeing what it's doing, and then we'll kind of make a call from that. Then inside we have got the instrument cluster out for some lights that don't work in there, and also there's some fairly funky wiring going on behind the dash which I found inadvertently, so just rectifying all that. We've got to do a four-wheel alignment on this, and then look at putting it back together. Also, along with what the customer wants from the car, we've got a new used airbox for it because the airbox is all broken and not very good, so we've got a new really good used airbox, standard airbox, and then we're going to put an ITG panel filter in that as well, so that will help the breathing and that will just help sort of complement the exhaust, because he's got stainless exhaust on it, so it sounds absolutely mega, this thing. So that's where we are with the Porsche. BM, not quite got onto the BM yet, been in touch with the customer, hoping to get onto that next week, do the inspection on that, and then we'll mosey on inside. Not a huge amount of progress on the Mercedes this week. We have got the Bilstein dampers and H&R springs on this now. One of the big things the customer wanted, in her words, was it handles like a boat, which you can probably appreciate being the size and the age of the car. So we've gone to a Bilstein damper and H&R spring, as I say, and then we've actually gone up on the wheel size, and the primary reason to go up on the wheel size is to reduce the profile of the tyre, just to take a bit of the sponginess out of the tyre as well. So that's looking really good. There's some really cool period style rims, so it's the same look, but we've gone from a 15 up to a 17 inch. So it's not kind of massive, it's not running on kind of rubber band tyres, but then nevertheless it will just help the handling of the car overall. So really pleased with how this is coming on. I'll be throwing up to James in a minute, and he can show you bits of the interior, because the interior is looking rather fantastic. I'm not always a fan of blue leather personally, but actually the shade of blue in this looks fantastic. I like it a lot. I'm slightly converted. Coming through, so we've got the E46 M3 CSL. Luke's back from his holiday to Turkey, looking very handsome, even if I do say so myself. So we have been trying to get the four-wheel alignment straight on this. The front track rods are all seized and just horrible and not very nice, so the customer on this car likes everything to be absolutely perfection. So we've got new track rod ends, steering arms and the inner joints as well. So we've got those on, and then Luke is just working the rear end at the moment, because the camber and the toe just a little bit out of spec. So to do the toes on these, you have to basically adjust the whole trailing arm. So we're just freeing all that off, making sure everything's nice and loose and free and greased, and then we can go back on the wheel alignment, and we're not kind of trying to do that in the moment. It's all ready to go, and we can just make those fine adjustments and get it right in spec. So that's all very good. And we also changed the bonnet catches on request of the customer, because they're a bit kind of rusty and not very nice. So we've done that. We found that the headlight washer this side was leaking, so we're changing that as well, hence the headlight's still out. And then again, as the customer likes the car to be immaculate, well, we've had a lot of the front end off. Luke's just gone round and thoroughly cleaned everything, giving it just a freshen up, so it's all looking absolutely fantastic. So we're coming on very nicely with that. Let's talk about the Lexus quickly. I'm just going to ping pong a little bit. So Owen is well into stripping the Lexus down. This came back from paint. I think this actually came back from paint between Jamie filming the different sections of the video. So I think it was missed last week. So this came back from Retropower last week. So it's had a complete paint job. We're now on with the mechanical. So Owen's basically stripping all the suspension off. The rear subframe in its entirety is off the car. And we're basically just going through a big parts list, get everything ordered. So anything that's perishable or wear and tear, we're replacing as a matter of course. Any of the kind of sticking points where on a 23-year-old car something might go wrong, we're changing. The customer wants this to be a reliable daily, hence he's investing quite a lot of money into it with us. So we're going through all those parts at the moment. As you can see, most of the front of the car is off. We're not going to go too heavily into the engine because it's not done a huge amount of miles. We will be doing obviously cam belt service, tensioner, water pump, all those kind of normal things. And then in due course we'll be getting onto some of the interior stuff. So we're going to upgrade the infotainment in there. It has got a screen in the dash, but it's quite old, so the resolution's really poor. So we're going to look at trying to integrate an Apple CarPlay screen into that unit to make that a bit more modern and have some useful features in there. And then James will be doing the front seats on this as well, which would be nice. And then we're going to have the dashboard out because it's got that horrible kind of early 2000s sticky dashboard thing where the plastics kind of melt a bit and it goes all sticky and horrible. So we're going to have the dashboard out and just rectify that. I'm not sure how yet, but we're going to have a look at doing that, which is great. So Owen's keeping very busy on that and doing a fantastic job. So the Metro, which no one seems to be interested in. So we're going to talk about the Metro. So as is widely known, Richard Porter from podcast Smith and Sniff, which is really hard to say, Smith and Sniff, has bought this via his good friend Johnny Smith. This car was obviously the feature of a late break show, which has done really, really well. Richard Porter, if you don't know, he's a writer and journalist, so he writes a lot of columns for some big publications, and he also worked on old Top Gear and the Grand Tour as well, script writing and editing those as well. So really lovely guy. So he's obsessed with old British Leyland cars, and when this came up, it was kind of a case of, well, find another one. So he bought this and he's brought it to us. We've done our inspection. So Richard came in this week to chat about next steps, what we're going to do, how we're going to approach it. So we're basically going to go through all the mechanicals first, and then we're going to have a look at bodywork stuff. The bodywork isn't too bad. It's a little bit tatty, but there's no rot anywhere on it because it was in a garage for so long from it being a relatively young car. So then once we've got all the mechanicals up and together, we can obviously then put a few miles on the car, sort out any little snagging things there might be, which inevitably there will be once we actually start driving the car. We'll get it set up on a rolling road just to get the carburetor checked and set properly, make sure that's running nice. These also have an electronic boost control in first and second gear to limit all the huge torque it makes because the gearboxes are quite fragile. So we can just make sure all those things are working and it's safe to drive and it's going to be reliable for Richard to use. Then after that, we'll then look at bodywork. So we're going to have this for a while over the winter. He's not really got any plans to use it, and he just wants it to be right before he has it back. He don't want to be coming back and forth all the time. So we'll be working our magic on this. Richard popped up yesterday he came up in a press car from Morgan, which is very cool. So we had a little look at their new Morgan, which if you follow Johnny Smith's late break show, he went down to the factory when they launched that and did a really interesting video on that, so you can go and have a look at that as well. So no, that was really cool. Lovely to see Richard. Top guy, sweet guy, as some might say. So yeah, we'll be cracking on with the Metro as well in due course, which is fantastic. In other news, we've been working on a top secret project we can't talk about, which is slightly annoying. So I think that's it for me for this week. So thank you very much. And actually, I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who wished us a very happy first birthday, all your lovely comments and your kind words, really appreciate it. Another get-together stroke open day is a bit TBC. I'm going to let Callum talk about that because there are some plans in the background that he is working on. Yeah, in the meantime, I shall hand upstairs to James.
Hi, welcome back to the trim shop. Back off holiday. I've got 2 little kids, so I feel like I needed a holiday to get over the holiday. But here we are, we're back, and it's all good. Merc's cracking on really well. Front seat's now finished. This is passenger seat. Waiting on a few bits. The headrest part in it was already broken, so we've ordered that. That's turned up, so we can go ahead and fit that into the driver's seat. Then I can crack on with that. That's all fitted to the foams. It's just got to go into the car. So really happy with how this comes out. Centres are looking fantastic. Back's looking great. I think the colour looks brilliant. It's going to look super good in that Merc. So yeah, really happy with that. Quattro we're cracking on with. All of the interior is pretty much into that now. Just got to sort out the headrests. The headlining, that's the word. So that's been printed. Just got to cover that, and that can go in, and then I'm done on that. This should be done hopefully next week. So 2 big projects done, although they have dropped off the centre console with me now, so that's beige. So I'm taking it, we're going to be going black with that. So we'll be covering that. Got a little Cosworth dash top that we've got to just trim in Alcantara, so that's going to look smart. Just got to do a bit of filling on that. Jamie will show you a picture of that. And then the big exciting news of the week, we now have the green machine, this beast of a machine that we can now put press studs in. So for things like the Quattro and the Allegros, we can now easily just stamp them and we can put press studs in. For things like carpets, like in the Quattro where we're going over pipes, it just easily makes it removable if they want to work on it. Because it's more of a track car, it just makes it so much easier for the customer for servicing and damaged pipes and stuff. So yeah, the exciting news is the green machine. Yeah, and I think that's it for me for this week. So yeah, see you next week.
Thank you very much, James. And that is all from us this week. Have a lovely week and we will see you all next time. Take care.